The phone buzzed for the 5th time in 10 minutes. David glanced at the screen while trying to tie his daughter's shoelaces. Another urgent email from the board. Another crisis that apparently couldn't wait until tomorrow. He sighed and put the phone face down on the kitchen counter. "Daddy, you're not listening," 6-year-old Lily said, tugging at his sleeve. Her school uniform was slightly wrinkled and her blonde hair needed brushing, but her bright blue eyes sparkled with that endless energy only children seem to possess. "I'm sorry, sweetheart. What were you saying?" David knelt down to meet her eye level, something his wife used to do. The memory hit him like it always did, sudden and sharp even 2 years after the accident. "I said Tommy brought his pet hamster to school today for show and tell." "Can we get a hamster, please?" Lily's hands were clasped together in that dramatic way she'd learned from watching too many cartoons. David smiled despite the stress weighing on his shoulders. "We'll talk about it later, okay? Right now we need to get you to school, or Mrs. Peterson will think I'm the worst dad in the world." "You're not the worst dad," Lily said seriously, wrapping her small arms around his neck. "You're just really busy all the time." The simple honesty in her voice made David's chest tighten. Out of the mouths of babes, his mother used to say. Lily was right, he was busy all the time, too busy. The tech company he'd built from nothing now demanded 16-hour days. Board meetings, investor calls, product launches, damage control. It never ended. When Caroline was alive, she'd handled the morning routine with Lily. She'd been the one who remembered picture day and school plays and birthday parties. She'd been the heart of their little family while David focused on building their future. Now he was trying to be both parents, and most days he felt like he was failing at both. The drive to Lily's school was their usual rush through morning traffic. David's hands-free device chirped constantly with calls he couldn't ignore. Lily sat in her car seat quietly coloring in a book, used to competing with his work for attention. "Thompson Industries. This is David," he answered another call while navigating through the school drop-off lane. "Sir, we have a problem with the Johnson account." His assistant's voice came through the speakers. "They're threatening to pull out unless we can guarantee the delivery date." David rubbed his forehead. The Johnson account was worth $12 million. "Schedule a call for this afternoon. We'll figure it out. Also, you have the board presentation at 3, dinner with investors at 7, and..." "Dad?" Lily's quiet voice interrupted. David held up one finger to signal he'd be just a moment, then continued listening to his assistant rattle off his packed schedule. When he finally hung up, they'd reached the front of the school. "What is it, Princess?" he asked, helping her out of the car. "Are you coming to my art show next Friday?" David's mind went blank. Art show? He pulled out his phone and scrolled through his calendar. "Nothing about an art show." "Of course I am. Wouldn't miss it." Lily beamed and gave him a quick hug before running toward the school entrance. David watched her go, her backpack bouncing with each step. He made a mental note to ask his assistant about rearranging his schedule. He'd already missed her school play last month because of an emergency client meeting. He couldn't miss the art show, too. The rest of the day blurred together in the usual chaos. Conference calls with Tokyo, urgent strategy meetings, putting out fires that seemed to multiply faster than he could handle them. By 6 o'clock, David's head was pounding, and he'd eaten nothing but coffee and a stale bagel someone had brought to the morning meeting. His assistant knocked on his office door. "Mr. Thompson? The car is here to take you to dinner with the Peterson Group." David looked up from his laptop screen, his eyes burning from staring at spreadsheets all day. "Cancel it, sir." "Cancel the dinner. Reschedule for next week." David was already shutting down his computer and grabbing his jacket. "But sir, this meeting has been planned for months. Mr. Peterson flew in from Chicago specifically." "I said cancel it." David's voice was firmer than he intended. His assistant looked surprised. In 5 years of working together, David had never canceled a client dinner. Something more important came up. The drive to Lily's after-school care took 30 minutes in evening traffic. David used the time to think about his wife's words from years ago. "Money can't hug you goodnight," she'd said during one of their rare arguments about his work schedule. "Success means nothing if you don't have anyone to share it with." At the time, he'd thought she was being dramatic. Now sitting alone in his luxury car while his 6-year-old waited for him at daycare, he understood what she meant. Lily's face lit up when she saw him walk through the doors of the care center.
"Daddy, you're early."
"I thought we could do something fun tonight." David said, helping her gather her art supplies and backpack. Just the two of us, really? What do you want to do? David thought about it. When was the last time they'd done something together that didn't involve rushing somewhere? How about dinner? Somewhere nice. We can take our time. Can we go to Romano's? Lily asked hopefully. Romano's was an upscale Italian restaurant downtown, the kind of place David usually took clients. It had become Lily's favorite after he'd taken her there for her birthday last year. Romano's it is. The restaurant was busy for a Tuesday night. David had called ahead, and they were seated at a quiet table by the window. Lily looked around with wide eyes at the fancy place settings and soft lighting. She always did this, took everything in like she was trying to memorize it. "This is nice, Daddy," she said, carefully unfolding her cloth napkin and placing it on her lap like Caroline had taught her. "Yeah, it is." David put his phone face down on the table and really looked at his daughter. When had she gotten so big? Her face was losing that baby roundness, and she was starting to look more like Caroline every day. The waiter brought them menus, and David watched Lily's lips move as she sounded out the Italian words. She could read better than most kids her age. Another gift from Caroline, who'd read to her every night. For the first time in months, David felt himself truly relax. No board meetings tomorrow morning. No crisis calls. Just dinner with his little girl the way it should be. David ordered Lily's usual chicken parmesan, and she was already chattering about her day when something caught her attention. Her voice trailed off mid-sentence, and she turned toward the window. "What is it, sweetheart?" David followed her gaze across the restaurant. Near the large window that overlooked the busy street, a young woman sat alone at a small table. She looked to be in her early 20s with dark hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. Her clothes were clean but worn, a faded sweater with a small hole near the sleeve and jeans that had seen better days. "She looks sad," Lily said quietly. Still watching the woman, David glanced over again. The woman was staring out the window, her hands wrapped around a glass of water. The table in front of her was empty except for the water and a small purse that looked like it had been through years of use. People come to restaurants alone sometimes. Lily, maybe she's waiting for someone. But even as he said it, David noticed things a child wouldn't. The way the woman's eyes followed every server who walked by carrying plates of food. How she sat up straighter whenever someone passed her table, as if hoping they were coming to take her order. The careful way she sipped her water, making it last. The waiter appeared at their table with warm bread and olive oil. "Good evening," he said cheerfully. "Can I start you folks off with some appetizers tonight?" David was about to answer when Lily spoke up. "Excuse me, but what about that lady over there? Doesn't she want to order food too?" The waiter glanced toward the window table and his expression shifted slightly. "She just ordered water for now. Said she was still deciding." After he left, David tried to redirect Lily's attention back to their own meal. "So tell me more about Tommy's hamster. What color is it?" But Lily wasn't easily distracted. She kept sneaking glances at the woman by the window. David watched too, despite himself. The woman had pulled out her phone and was scrolling through it, but her movements seemed forced, like she was trying to look busy. Their appetizer arrived, mozzarella sticks that Lily normally attacked with enthusiasm. Tonight she picked at one half-heartedly. "Not hungry?" David asked. "I am, but..." Lily looked toward the window again. "Daddy, I think she really is sad, and maybe hungry too." David followed his daughter's gaze once more. This time he noticed the woman checking her watch, then looking toward the door like she was expecting someone who wasn't coming. She opened her purse and David caught a glimpse of what was inside. A few crumpled bills and some loose change. "Not much." The woman caught their waiter's attention and said something to him. David couldn't hear the conversation, but he saw the waiter nod and write something down. A few minutes later, he returned to her table with a small basket of the restaurant's complimentary bread. Lily's eyes widened. "She only ordered bread? Maybe she's not very hungry," David said, though he was beginning to understand what his daughter was seeing. "But Daddy, bread isn't dinner. Mommy used to say bread was just the beginning of a good meal." Lily's voice dropped to a whisper. "What if she doesn't have enough money for real food?" David's chest tightened. Lily was too young to fully understand poverty, but her innocent observations were painfully accurate. He'd been so caught up in his own world of business, deals and profit margins, that he'd almost forgotten there were people who struggled to afford basic meals. The woman at the window table was eating the bread slowly, making each piece last. She would take a small bite, then put it down and sip her water before taking another bite. It was the behavior of someone who knew this might be all they would eat for a while. She reminds me of the people Mommy used to help at the food kitchen, Lily said suddenly. David's breath caught. Caroline had volunteered at a local soup kitchen every Saturday morning before Lily was born. She'd tried to get David to come with her a few times, but he'd always had work to catch up on. Business doesn't stop for charity, he'd said back then. Caroline had gone alone, serving meals to families who needed help. Mommy always said food tastes better when you share it, Lily continued, her small voice serious in the way that sometimes made her sound older than 6. Remember how she used to make extra dinner sometimes? And then we'd take it to Mrs. Chen next door when she was sick. David remembered. Caroline had a gift for noticing when people needed help, and she never hesitated to offer it. She'd taught Lily the same kindness, though David realized he'd been too busy to nurture that lesson since Caroline died. Their main courses arrived. Lily's chicken parmesan was huge, enough food for 2 adults. She stared at it for a long moment, then looked back at the woman by the window, who was still slowly eating her bread. "Daddy?" Lily's voice was very quiet. "What is it, Princess?" "She looks hungry. Really hungry. And look how much food I have." Lily gestured to her plate. "Mommy always said we should help people who need it. Can I share my meal with her?" David opened his mouth to say no. This was a nice restaurant, not a soup kitchen. You didn't just walk up to strangers and offer them food. It could be embarrassing for the woman. It could cause a scene. There were proper channels for helping people, charities, and organizations that handled these things. But then he looked at his daughter's face. Her blue eyes, so much like Caroline's, were filled with genuine concern for a complete stranger. This was the same compassion Caroline had tried to teach him years ago, the kind he'd been too busy to learn. "I don't know. Lily, we don't know anything about her situation. But what if she's really hungry? What if she came here hoping to eat but didn't have enough money?" Lily's eyes were starting to well up with tears. What if that was me sitting there and nobody helped? The question hit David like a punch to the chest. What if it was Lily? What if something happened to him? And his little girl found herself alone and hungry in a restaurant, hoping someone would show her kindness. He looked at the woman again. She had finished the bread and was staring out the window, her hands folded in her lap. There was dignity in the way she sat, a quiet pride that David recognized. She wasn't asking for help, probably too proud to ask, but she was clearly struggling. "Please, Daddy," Lily whispered. "I have way too much food and she doesn't have any. Mommy would have helped her." David felt something shift inside his chest. Caroline would have helped, without hesitation, without worrying about what other people thought, without overthinking the situation. She would have seen someone in need and acted. He'd spent 2 years trying to be both mother and father to Lily, but he'd forgotten the most important lesson Caroline would have wanted him to teach their daughter. That kindness matters more than comfort, and compassion is never inappropriate. "You really want to help her?" David asked softly. Lily nodded, a tear rolling down her cheek. "She looks so lonely, Daddy, and hungry. I can't eat all this food knowing she's just sitting there with nothing." David looked at his daughter, really looked at her, and saw Caroline's heart beating in this little person. His wife's greatest gift hadn't been her beauty or her intelligence. It had been her ability to see people who were hurting and do something about it. Maybe it was time he learned that lesson. 2. David stared at his daughter's tear-filled eyes and felt something crack open in his chest. For 2 years, he'd been so focused on providing security for Lily that he'd forgotten to nurture the very qualities that made Caroline special, and that were now shining through in their daughter. "Okay," he said quietly. "But we need to be respectful about it. We don't want to embarrass her." Lily's face brightened immediately. She wiped her eyes with her napkin and nodded seriously. "I'll be very polite, just like Mommy taught me." David looked around the restaurant, suddenly aware of how other people might perceive what they were about to do. The other diners were well-dressed, focused on their own conversations and expensive meals. The woman by the window seemed to exist in a different world entirely. "Maybe we should ask the waiter to take her some food instead," David suggested, still hesitant. That might be less awkward for everyone. But Lily was already pushing back her chair. "No, Daddy. If we send food through someone else, she might think it's charity from the restaurant. But if I ask her myself, she'll know it's from a friend." The simple wisdom in his 6-year-old's words stopped David cold. Lily understood something he'd lost sight of. That dignity mattered as much as the help itself. They stood up together, Lily carrying her plate of chicken parmesan that was still mostly untouched. David's heart was racing as they walked across the restaurant. He couldn't remember the last time he'd felt this nervous about a business deal, let alone a simple act of kindness. The young woman looked up as they approached her table. Up close, David could see she was probably in college, early 20s at most. Her eyes were a deep brown, intelligent but tired. There was a wariness there too, like someone who'd learned to be careful about trusting people. "Hi," Lily said in her sweetest voice. "I'm Lily and this is my daddy." The woman smiled and it transformed her entire face. "Hello, Lily, I'm Rebecca." "Rebecca, I was wondering." Lily glanced up at David for encouragement, then continued. "I have this really big dinner and I can't eat it all by myself. I was hoping maybe you'd like to share it with me. My mommy always said food tastes better when you eat it with friends." David watched Rebecca's expression change. Surprise flickered across her features, followed by something that might have been embarrassment. Her cheeks flushed slightly. "That's very sweet of you, honey, but I couldn't." "Please," Lily interrupted gently. "I really do have too much food. And you look like you might be hungry. Are you hungry?" The direct question, asked with such innocent concern, seemed to catch Rebecca off guard. David saw her swallow hard, her composure wavering. Rebecca's voice was barely a whisper. "Yes, I am hungry." The admission seemed to cost her something. David felt his throat tighten as he recognized the pride it took for this young woman to acknowledge her need to a 6-year-old child. "Then it's perfect," Lily beamed. "We can be dinner friends. Daddy, can Rebecca sit with us? Our table is bigger." David found his voice. "Of course. Rebecca, would you like to join us?" Lily's right, she ordered enough food for 3 people. Rebecca looked between David and Lily, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "I don't want to intrude on your dinner. You two look like you were having a nice father-daughter evening." "You're not intruding," David said, and he meant it. "Actually, I think Lily would be disappointed if you said no. She's been worried about you sitting over here by yourself." "You were worried about me?" Rebecca asked Lily, her voice soft with wonder. Lily nodded earnestly. "You looked sad and lonely, and when the waiter brought you just bread, I thought maybe you needed a friend." A single tear rolled down Rebecca's cheek. She quickly wiped it away, but not before David saw it. "You know what? I would love to be your dinner friend, Lily. Thank you for asking." They helped Rebecca gather her few belongings, just her purse and an old textbook, and moved to David's table. The waiter looked surprised but quickly brought Rebecca a place setting and helped arrange the seating. "So what are you studying?" David asked as Rebecca settled into her chair, trying to keep the conversation light. "Social work," Rebecca replied, some of the tension leaving her shoulders. "I'm in my 3rd year at the community college." "That's wonderful," David said. "What made you choose social work?" Rebecca glanced at Lily, who was carefully dividing her chicken parmesan into 3 equal portions. "I grew up in foster care, had some social workers who really made a difference in my life. I want to do the same for other kids." The simple statement hit David hard. Here was someone who had experienced real hardship, but had chosen to dedicate her life to helping others. Meanwhile, he spent his days chasing profit margins and market share. "That's beautiful," he said quietly. Lily had finished portioning the food and pushed the plate toward the center of the table. "There, now we all have enough. Rebecca, do you like chicken parmesan?" "I love it," Rebecca said, her voice thick with emotion. "I haven't had it in a very long time." As they began to eat, Lily kept up a steady stream of chatter about school, her friends, and her hopes of getting a hamster. Rebecca listened with genuine interest, asking questions and laughing at Lily's stories. David found himself relaxing, watching the two of them interact. "So, Rebecca," Lily said between bites, "why were you sitting by yourself? Don't you have friends to eat dinner with?" David winced slightly at his daughter's directness, but Rebecca didn't seem offended. "Well, most of my friends are back home, and I haven't made many new ones yet. Plus, I've been working a lot to pay for school, so I don't have much time for social stuff." "You work and go to school?" Lily's eyes widened. "That sounds really hard." "It is sometimes," Rebecca admitted. "But it's worth it. I want to help kids like you have better lives." David had been quiet, listening to the conversation, but something made him ask, "What kind of work do you do?" Rebecca's cheeks colored slightly. I had a job at a coffee shop, but I lost it last week. The manager said they needed to cut hours, and since I was the newest person, she shrugged, trying to appear casual. But David could see the worry in her eyes. So you haven't been working at all this week? David asked gently. No. And I've been looking everywhere, but most places want someone who can work days. And I have classes then. Rebecca took a small bite of her food, making it last. I'm sure I'll find something soon, but felt something shift inside him as he watched this young woman, barely, older than some of his summer interns, trying to maintain her dignity while clearly struggling. She reminded him of Caroline in some ways, that same determination to help others even when facing her own challenges. Rebecca, Lily said suddenly, are you really poor? Lily, David started to intervene, but Rebecca held up a gentle hand. It's okay. Yes, Lily, I am pretty poor right now, but that's okay. Sometimes grown-ups go through tough times just like kids do. The important thing is not to give up. Lily considered this seriously. My daddy has lots of money. Maybe he could help you find a job. David felt heat rise in his cheeks. Lily, that's not… Actually, he stopped himself. Why wasn't that something he could do? He employed hundreds of people. Surely there was a position that could work around a student's schedule. The idea surprised him with its simplicity. David found himself studying Rebecca as she answered Lily's endless questions. There was something remarkable about this young woman. Despite clearly struggling to make ends meet, she spoke about her future with hope. Despite having grown up without a stable family, she wanted to dedicate her life to helping children find theirs. So when you become a social worker, Lily was saying, will you help kids find new mommies and daddies? Sometimes, Rebecca replied gently. But mostly I'll try to help families stay together when they can. Sometimes people just need a little support to get through tough times. David felt a strange tightness in his chest. When was the last time he'd thought about helping families rather than building corporate profits? When had his priorities become so narrow? That sounds like what my mommy used to do, Lily continued. She didn't have a job helping people, but she was always helping anyway. She'd bring food to sick neighbors and visit old people who were lonely. Rebecca's eyes softened. Your mommy sounds like she was a very special person. She was, Lily said matter-of-factly. She died in a car accident when I was 4. But Daddy takes good care of me now. He works really, really hard to make sure we have everything we need. David saw Rebecca glance at him with new understanding. There was compassion in her eyes, not pity, but genuine empathy for what they'd both lost and found. I'm sorry about your mom, Lily, Rebecca said quietly. But it sounds like she taught you some important things about being kind to people. She did. And so does Daddy, even though he's always busy. Lily looked up at David with such trust and love that he felt his throat close up. The waiter appeared at their table. How is everything this evening? Wonderful, Rebecca said quickly. Thank you. Can I get anyone dessert coffee? David was about to decline when Lily piped up. Can Rebecca have dessert too? I think she'd like the chocolate cake. Lily, David started, but Rebecca was already shaking her head. Oh no, I couldn't. You've already been so generous. Please. Lily's eyes were wide and hopeful. I want to share dessert too. And you're so skinny. My mommy always said skinny people needed extra dessert. Despite everything, Rebecca laughed. A real, genuine laugh that lit up her whole face. Your mommy sounds like she had the right idea about dessert. David found himself smiling too. 3 chocolate cakes, he told the waiter. As they waited for dessert, the conversation flowed more naturally. Rebecca told them about her classes, her favorite professor who'd encouraged her to keep going even when things got tough. She talked about the children she hoped to help someday, kids who reminded David a little too much of Lily, vulnerable and deserving of protection. Where do you live? Lily asked with her typical directness. I have a small apartment about 20 minutes from campus, Rebecca said. Well, I share it with 2 other students, so really I have a small room. And you walk to school every day? Usually. Sometimes I can catch a ride with my roommate, but mostly I walk. It's good exercise. David did the mental math. 20 minutes by car probably meant over an hour walking each way. In the rain. In the cold. While hungry. What about your family? David asked. Do they help with school expenses? Rebecca's smile dimmed slightly. I aged out of foster care at 18. No family to speak of. But that's okay. It's made me pretty independent. The casual way she said it, like not having anyone in the world who cared about her was perfectly normal, hit David like a physical blow. Here he was, complaining about being busy while he had a daughter who loved him, a successful company, more money than he could spend in a lifetime. And this young woman, with nothing but her determination and kindness, was facing the world completely alone. The chocolate cake arrived, and Lily immediately dug in with enthusiasm. Rebecca took smaller, more careful bites, savoring each one. "This is the best cake I've ever had," she said, and David could tell she wasn't just being polite. "When was the last time you had chocolate cake?" Lily asked. Rebecca thought about it. "My birthday last year. My roommate surprised me with a cupcake from the grocery store." She smiled at the memory. It was really sweet of her. A grocery store cupcake for her birthday. David spent more on lunch most days than this girl had probably spent on food all week. "When's your birthday this year?" Lily continued. "Next month, actually. October 15th. You should come have birthday dinner with us," Lily announced. "Right, Daddy? We can get a really big cake and everything." David saw Rebecca's face flush. "Oh, Lily, that's very nice, but why not?" David heard himself asking. The question surprised him as much as it seemed to surprise Rebecca. "Well, I mean, you don't really know me, and we know you're studying to help children," David said. "We know you're working hard to build a better life. We know you're kind enough to have dinner with a 6-year-old who was worried about you. That seems like plenty to know." Rebecca stared at him, her dark eyes shining. "You would really want me to come for my birthday?" "Yes!" Lily bounced in her seat. "And we can get to know each other better before then. Maybe you can come visit us sometime?" David watched Rebecca's face cycle through emotions: hope, disbelief, gratitude, and something that looked like relief. Like she'd been holding her breath for so long she'd forgotten what it felt like to exhale. "I would love that," Rebecca whispered. As they finished their cake, David found himself asking Rebecca more about her studies, her goals, her daily routine. The more she talked, the more impressed he became. She was carrying 18 credit hours, had maintained a 3.8 GPA despite working to support herself, and volunteered at a local children's center on weekends. "You volunteer too?" David asked. "Even with everything else you have going on?" Rebecca shrugged. "Those kids need someone to show up for them. I know what it's like when no one does." David felt something shift inside him, a recognition that he'd been living in a bubble of his own making. Success had insulated him from seeing how many people struggled, how many needed just a small hand up to change their lives. "Rebecca," he said carefully, "you mentioned you're looking for work that fits around your class schedule." She nodded, suddenly alert. "My company, Thompson Industries, we have several positions that might work. Part-time, flexible hours. Good pay." David paused, realizing he was making this decision without consulting his HR department, without following proper procedures. It didn't matter. "Would you be interested in interviewing?" Rebecca's fork clattered against her plate. "Are you serious?" "Very serious. We have a community outreach program that's been underdeveloped. We need someone who understands what it means to help people, someone who cares about making a difference. But you don't know if I'm qualified. You're studying social work. You've maintained excellent grades while supporting yourself, and you volunteer with children in your spare time. Plus, you were kind enough to have dinner with strangers because a little girl asked you to." David smiled. "I think you're exactly what we need." Lily clapped her hands together. "Rebecca's going to work with you, Daddy?" "That's perfect." Rebecca was crying now, tears streaming down her face. "I don't know what to say. This morning I was wondering how I was going to pay rent next month, and now you have friends," Lily said simply. "And friends help each other." David looked at his daughter, this wise little person who saw the world with such clarity. She was right. This wasn't about business or charity, or even helping someone in need. This was about recognizing that some connections matter more than contracts, that some meetings matter more than profits. For the first time in 2 years, David felt like he was honoring Caroline's memory in a way that mattered. "So," he said to Rebecca, "can you come in Monday morning for a proper interview?" "Just a formality, really." Rebecca wiped her eyes and nodded, smiling through her tears. "I'll be there." Lily grinned and reached across the table to take Rebecca's hand. "This is the best dinner ever," she announced. David couldn't argue with that assessment. 6 months later, David stood in his office watching through the large window as Rebecca organized volunteers in the parking lot below. It was a Saturday morning, and nearly 50 employees from Thompson Industries had shown up for the monthly community food drive, something that had started as a small program and grown beyond anything he'd imagined. "Daddy, look how many people came today." Lily pressed her nose against the window beside him. She was wearing a bright yellow t-shirt that read Thompson Industries Community Heroes, the same shirt all the volunteers wore. "I see that, Princess." Pretty amazing, isn't it? What was amazing was how much had changed since that evening at Romano's. Rebecca had started working part-time in their community outreach department, initially just answering phones and organizing paperwork. But within weeks, David realized they'd found someone special. Rebecca didn't just work in community outreach, she lived it. She'd suggested the food drives after learning that several employees were struggling to make ends meet between paychecks. She'd organized mentorship programs pairing company executives with local foster kids. She'd even convinced David to start a scholarship fund for students aging out of foster care. "There's Rebecca," Lily pointed excitedly as their friend emerged from the building carrying boxes of canned goods. Rebecca looked different now. She'd gained some weight, her clothes were newer, and there was a confidence in her step that hadn't been there 6 months ago. But more than that, she glowed with purpose. The job had given her financial stability, but working in community outreach had given her something more valuable: the ability to help people on a scale she'd never imagined. "Can we go help now?" Lily tugged on David's sleeve. "In a minute. I want to finish reviewing these reports first." David caught himself before the words were fully out of his mouth. 6 months ago, he would have said exactly that. He would have prioritized paperwork over spending time with his daughter, over participating in something that mattered to his community. "Actually, you know what? The reports can wait. Let's go help." Lily's face lit up like Christmas morning. "Really? Really? Come on." They took the elevator down to the ground floor, and David felt that familiar shift that happened whenever he stepped away from his desk these days. For years, leaving his office had felt like abandoning his post. Now it felt like coming alive. The parking lot buzzed with activity. Employees sorted donations into categories while others loaded boxes into trucks that would deliver food to 3 different local shelters. David recognized faces from every department, people who had started volunteering after seeing their CEO show up to sort canned goods on Saturday mornings. "David!" Rebecca jogged over, her arms full of clipboards. "Perfect timing. We just got word that the shelter downtown needs extra help today. Their regular volunteer coordinator called in sick. What do you need? Could you and Lily help me run supplies over there?" "I know it's asking a lot on your Saturday, Rebecca," David interrupted gently. 6 months ago, you worried about asking me for help with anything outside of business hours. Haven't we gotten past that yet?" She smiled, that same bright smile that had transformed her face during their first dinner together. "Old habits. But yes, we definitely have." And an hour later, David found himself in the kitchen of Grace Community Shelter, wearing an apron and serving lunch to people who reminded him of Rebecca from that night at the restaurant. Men and women who had fallen on hard times, families struggling to get back on their feet, elderly people whose fixed incomes weren't enough to cover both rent and food. Lily worked beside him, chattering with everyone who came through the line. She remembered names from their previous visits, asked about people's pets, and somehow managed to make each person feel like they were the most important guest at a fancy party. "Mr. David," called out Mrs. Patterson, an elderly woman who came to the shelter every Saturday. "That daughter of yours is something special." David looked over at Lily, who was carefully placing extra rolls on an older gentleman's tray while telling him about her latest art project at school. "She really is. Takes after her mama, I bet." "In the best ways," David agreed. After they finished serving, David sat with Rebecca and Lily at one of the long tables, sharing a simple lunch with the shelter's guests. This had become their routine: work together, eat together, treat everyone with the same dignity and respect. "You know," Rebecca said quietly, "I never thanked you properly for that night." "You don't need to thank me. Lily was the one who insisted we help. But you could have said no. You could have made excuses. Most people would have." David thought about that. Most people probably wouldn't have a 6-year-old daughter who sees the world the way Lily does. "It's not just Lily," Rebecca insisted. "You chose to listen to her. You chose to act? That's not as common as you might think. Across the table, Lily was teaching a young mother how to fold napkins into flowers, something she'd learned at school. The woman's toddler giggled with delight each time Lily presented him with a new paper bloom. Rebecca's right, you know. The voice belonged to Father Martinez, the shelter's director. He sat down beside them with his own lunch tray. I've been running this place for 15 years. I've seen a lot of people come through here wanting to help. Most of them show up once or twice, write a check, and disappear. You three have been here every Saturday for months. It's become the best part of our week, David said, and realized he meant it completely. What I find remarkable, Father Martinez continued, is how it's changed your employees too. We've had more volunteers from Thompson Industries in the past 6 months than we usually get in 2 years. And it's not just the volunteering. They're different when they come. More engaged, more invested. David knew what he meant. Company morale had never been higher. Employee retention was at an all-time best. People seemed genuinely excited about coming to work, knowing that their company stood for something beyond profit. It turns out, David said, that when you give people a chance to make a difference, they take it. Speaking of making a difference, Rebecca said, pulling out her phone, I got some news yesterday that I wanted to share with you both. She pulled up an email and handed David the phone. As he read, his eyebrows rose. What is it, Daddy? Lily leaned over to look. Rebecca got accepted to graduate school, David said, his voice full of pride. With a full scholarship, Lily squealed and threw her arms around Rebecca. You're going to be a real social worker. I'm going to be the best social worker I can be, Rebecca said, hugging Lily back. And it's all because 2 people cared enough to share their dinner with a stranger. When do you start? David asked. Next fall. But don't worry. I'll still be able to work part-time with the community program. This is my family now, too. David felt his throat tighten with emotion. Family. That's exactly what this had become. Not just him and Lily, but this whole network of people caring for each other. As they prepared to leave the shelter, Lily ran up to Father Martinez with a handful of her paper flower napkins. These are for people who need to smile, she announced, pressing them into his hands. Thank you, little one. These will make a lot of people very happy. On the drive home, Lily fell asleep in her car seat, exhausted from a morning of helping others. David glanced at Rebecca in the passenger seat, grateful for the millionth time that his daughter had seen something in a stranger that he'd almost missed. You know what's funny? Rebecca said quietly so as not to wake Lily. What's that? That night at the restaurant, I went there hoping to buy just a cup of coffee with the last money I had. I thought maybe I could make it last long enough to feel normal for an hour. David remembered the empty table, the careful way she'd sipped her water. Instead, I found a family. I found purpose. I found hope. Rebecca smiled out the window. All because a little girl noticed I looked hungry. Lily has a gift for seeing people, David said. It's something she got from her mother. And from her father, Rebecca added. You could have ignored her that night. You could have taught her that other people's problems weren't her concern, but you didn't. You listened to her heart and you followed it. David thought about the man he'd been 6 months ago, so focused on success that he'd forgotten what success actually meant. It wasn't about money or recognition or beating the competition. It was about making a difference. It was about raising a daughter who would make the world better just by being in it. As they pulled into his driveway, David made a mental note to call his assistant Monday morning. There were more changes he wanted to make at the company, more ways they could help their community. Rebecca had shown him that business could be a force for good, and Lily had shown him that kindness was never wasted. Same time next Saturday? Rebecca asked as she got out of the car. Wouldn't miss it, David replied. Some dinners change everything. This one had changed 3 lives, then dozens, then hundreds, and it was just getting started.